Story 1. Scarlet Prom. The haunting of Hollowbrook High School's prom night was meant to be a night of elegance and celebration, but it would soon become a night etched in the town's darkest history. Emma, a young and ambitious girl, had been preparing for this night for months. Her dress, a stunning blood-red gown with intricate lace and sequin patterns, was the talk of the school. As the night began, Emma danced with her date, Lucas, in the grand ballroom. The chandeliers above bathed them in a crimson glow, casting eerie shadows on the dance floor. Everything seemed perfect until a chilling breeze swept through the room. The temperature dropped drastically, causing the windows to frost over. It was as if the room had become a portal to the netherworld. Emma's dress began to change. Dark, viscous stains of blood appeared on the lace and sequins, spreading like a malevolent ink. The satin of the gown turned cold and clammy against her skin. Panicked, she tried to leave the dance floor, but her gown clung to her like a second skin. It was as if the dress itself had come alive, its tendrils of lace wrapping around her limbs, making escape impossible. Paranormal activity escalated. Tables overturned with a deafening crash. Candles extinguished themselves with ghostly wisps, and whispers filled the air, growing louder and more menacing with each passing second. The terrified students watched in horror as their prom descended into chaos. The once elegant ballroom, now a nightmare realm. Amid the chaos, a fight erupted between two rivaling groups. Fueled by the supernatural tension in the room, it was as if an invisible malevolent force was pushing them towards violence. Fists and claws tore at one another as a thick red mist seemed to envelop the room, making it difficult to breathe. As the prom-goers battled, they noticed their reflections in the shattered mirrors lining the walls. Instead of their own faces, grotesque and twisted visages stared back at them, grinning maliciously, teeth sharp as knives. It was as if the mirrors were showing them their innermost fears and darkest desires, a horrifying reflection of their own souls. Emma, desperate to escape the nightmarish scene, sought help from a teacher who'd been overseeing the event. Together, they tried to exit through the grand double doors, but the doors refused to budge, as if an invisible hand held them firmly shut. It was as if an unseen force was determined to keep them inside, trapping them in this hellish prom. As the fight raged on, the ghostly whispers grew louder, forming an eerie, incomprehensible chant that echoed through the ballroom, crawling up the spines of those present. Emma realized that the dress was a cursed relic connected to a tragic incident from the past. She pleaded with the spirits to release her, promising to make amends for whatever wrong had been done. In response, the malevolent presence intensified, and the dress tightened its grip on her, constricting her like a python. The room seemed to pulse with dark energy, the walls themselves seeming to breathe with malevolence. Just when all hope seemed lost, a blinding light engulfed Emma, causing the dress to wither and crumble away. The bloodstains on the gown evaporated like mist, leaving her standing in her undergarments, breathless and shaken. The paranormal activity ceased, and the doors finally swung open with a mournful creak. The once joyful prom had turned into a night of bloodshed, terror, and supernatural horrors. The students were left traumatized, forever haunted by the nightmares they had witnessed. Hollowbrook High School's prom night would forever be remembered as Scarlet Prom, a night when a cursed dress unleashed paranormal horrors, a deadly fight, and an escape that came at a terrible cost, leaving a scar on the town that would never fade. Story 2. The Haunting Melody. Prom night at Blackwood Academy, an old and imposing mansion, stood on the outskirts of town. It had been the setting for countless ghost stories, but that didn't deter the students of Lincoln High School from hosting their prom there. As the night began, the grand ballroom of Blackwood Academy shimmered with opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the walls were adorned with portraits of past graduates. Sarah, a bookish and introverted student, had been convinced by her friends to attend. Her heart raced as she twirled in her elegant emerald green gown. The night unfolded beautifully until the clock struck midnight. A haunting melody filled the air, a mournful piano tune that no one recognized. The orchestra fell silent, and the students turned their attention to the grand piano at the center of the room. But there was no pianist to be found. As the ghostly music continued, Sarah noticed strange occurrences. The portraits on the walls seemed to shift, their eyes following her every move. Her friends laughed it off, blaming it on the eerie atmosphere of the mansion. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. A sudden power outage plunged the ballroom into darkness, and terrified screams filled the air. When the lights flickered back on, Sarah's friends were nowhere to be found. Panic swept through the remaining students as they realized that several of their peers had disappeared without a trace. Sarah ventured into the dimly lit corridors of Blackwood Academy, desperate to find her friends. The mansion seemed to stretch endlessly, its layout shifting and changing, trapping her in a labyrinth of dark hallways. The haunting piano melody followed her, growing louder with each step. She stumbled upon a hidden room filled with dusty old yearbooks. The yearbooks revealed a disturbing pattern. Students who had attended Blackwood Academy proms throughout the years had gone missing, their faces fading from the pages as if they had never existed. As Sarah continued her search, she heard her friends' voices calling out to her. The voices led her to the grand piano in the ballroom, where her friends stood, their faces pale and their eyes vacant. They swayed to the haunting melody, their movements robotic and lifeless. Desperation consumed Sarah as she realized that something malevolent had taken control of her friends. The haunting melody emanated from the piano, which played on its own, its keys moving as if guided by an invisible hand. In a final act of bravery, Sarah smashed the piano with a nearby candlestick. The room fell into silence, and her friends collapsed to the ground, free from the ghostly influence. But the mansion itself seemed to shudder, as if angered by the disruption. With her friends rescued, Sarah raced to leave the mansion. The walls shifted and distorted, trying to keep her trapped. The haunting melody echoed in her ears as she ran, growing louder and more intense. She felt an icy hand brush against her shoulder, but refused to look back. Finally, as the first light of dawn broke, Sarah stumbled out of Blackwood Academy. She turned to see the mansion disappear into thin air, leaving nothing but an empty field behind. Prom night at Blackwood Academy became a legend, a night when a malevolent entity sought to claim the souls of the students who dared to enter. Sarah's friends were never the same, forever haunted by the sinister melody, and she could never forget the horrors she had witnessed in that haunted mansion. Story 3. The Haunting Waltz. Prom night at Whispering Pines High School had a dark and tragic past, but it was prom night, and the students were determined to make it memorable. The event was held in an old, decrepit mansion on the outskirts of town, rumored to be haunted. Lena, a quiet and introverted girl, had been looking forward to prom for years. She had the perfect dress, a beautiful silver gown that shimmered like moonlight. Her date, Mark, was the star of the football team, and they were the envy of everyone. As the night began, the mansion's grand ballroom came to life with the enchanting melodies of a live orchestra. The dance floor was adorned with roses, and the chandeliers cast eerie shadows across the room. Everything was perfect until a cold gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing the candles and sending a shiver down Lena's spine. Unbeknownst to Lena, Mark had a dark secret. He had brought a stolen Ouija board to the prom, intending to impress his friends with a late-night seance. The board was hidden in a corner of the mansion, away from prying eyes. As the night wore on, Lena noticed strange occurrences. The mirrors lining the walls seemed to warp and distort her reflection, showing her with hollow eyes and a ghastly pallor. Her unease grew, but Mark reassured her, blaming it on the eerie atmosphere. As the clock struck midnight, Mark suggested they explore the mansion. Lena hesitated but agreed. They ventured into a dimly lit corridor, guided only by the moonlight seeping through the cracked windows. Mark led her to the hidden Ouija board. With trembling fingers, they placed their hands on the planchette, and Mark initiated the seance. At first, nothing happened, but then the planchette began to move on its own, spelling out sinister messages in a language neither of them understood. A chilling presence filled the room, and Lena felt a cold hand brush against her neck. She turned to see a shadowy figure in a tattered prom dress, its face obscured by long, matted hair. The ghostly apparition whispered, "Dance with me." Lena screamed and tried to flee, but Mark was entranced by the ghostly figure. He waltzed with it, oblivious to Lena's pleas. The other students, drawn by the commotion, entered the room to find Lena alone, frantically searching for Mark. They formed a search party and combed the mansion, but there was no sign of Mark. The mansion seemed to change, its corridors shifting and leading them in circles. The ghostly apparition continued to torment Lena, whispering chilling promises. Days turned into weeks, and Mark was never found. Lena was forever changed by that night, her once beautiful silver dress now a tattered reminder of the horrors she had witnessed. The mansion, they realized too late, was a malevolent entity that fed on the souls of those who dared to dance within its haunted walls. Prom night at Whispering Pines High School became a legend, a night when a ghostly waltz claimed the life of a student, and the mansion's dark secret was revealed. Story 4. Masked Enchantment. The prom night curse of St. Agnes Mansion the night was alive with anticipation as St. Agnes High School's prom got underway. The old, decrepit mansion chosen as the venue had a dark history, but the students were too excited to notice. Among them was Lily, an outsider who had never quite fit in, but had somehow found herself a date, Daniel, the most popular guy in school. As the night progressed, the mansion's eerie creaks and flickering lights went unnoticed. The students danced and laughed, their joy filling the air. But Lily couldn't shake a strange feeling of dread. She spotted a portrait on the wall that seemed to watch her, its eyes following her every move. She tried to pull Daniel aside to share her unease, but he brushed her off, caught up in the revelry. Lily felt increasingly isolated, and her unease grew. She decided to explore the mansion on her own. Venturing into a dimly lit corridor, Lily stumbled upon a locked door. Something compelled her to find the key. She searched room after room until she finally discovered an ornate key hidden in an old music box. With trembling hands, she unlocked the door and found herself in a hidden ballroom. The room was filled with ancient masks, each one more grotesque than the last. Lily couldn't resist trying one on. As soon as she did, a sinister transformation overcame her. She returned to the prom wearing the mask, blending in seamlessly with the other masked dancers. No one recognized her. Daniel, captivated by her sudden allure, asked her to dance. They swayed together, and Lily couldn't help but notice something peculiar about the other masked guests. Their movements were jerky and unnatural, like marionettes on strings. As the night wore on, the masks began to fuse with the faces of those who wore them, becoming grotesque and permanent fixtures. Lily's mask was no exception, and it fused with her skin, sealing her fate. In a horrifying revelation, Lily realized the mansion was a cursed place, where those who wore the masks became eternal prisoners, trapped in a never-ending prom night. Desperation and terror filled her as she watched her fellow students transform into nightmarish creatures. She managed to escape the mansion, ripping the mask from her face, but the curse had taken its toll. Her face was forever contorted into a twisted grin. Lily roamed the streets, a living nightmare, unable to escape the horrors of that prom night. And so, the mansion's dark secret remained, claiming the souls of unsuspecting prom-goers who dared to dance in its cursed ballroom. Story 5. Dance of the Damned. The haunting prom night of Willowbrook High. It was prom night, and the excitement in the air was palpable. The students of Willowbrook High had been eagerly anticipating this night for months. The gymnasium was adorned with twinkling fairy lights, and the DJ was playing the latest hits as the students danced the night away. Amelia, a shy and introverted girl, had been asked to the prom by her crush, Jake. She couldn't believe her luck and had spent weeks picking out the perfect dress and getting ready for the big night. But as the evening wore on, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The gym's windows rattled as a sudden gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing some of the candles on the tables. Amelia's heart raced as she looked around, but everyone seemed unfazed. She decided it was just her nerves and continued to dance with Jake. As the night progressed, Amelia noticed something peculiar about some of the other students. Their faces seemed different, distorted somehow. Their eyes were hollow and lifeless, and their smiles were twisted into unnatural grins. She tugged on Jake's arm and whispered, "Do you see that?" Jake looked puzzled. "See what, Amelia?" But when he turned to look at the other students, they appeared normal to him. Panic welled up inside Amelia as she realized that whatever she was seeing, Jake couldn't. She decided to leave the dance floor for some fresh air. Outside the gym, the moon cast an eerie glow over the empty courtyard. Amelia's footsteps echoed as she walked toward a dimly lit gazebo. She heard a faint, sinister laughter that sent shivers down her spine. Turning around, she saw a shadowy figure lurking in the darkness. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling. The figure stepped into the light, revealing a grotesque, disfigured face. It was one of the students from the prom, but unrecognizable in this horrifying state. Amelia stumbled backward in horror, but the figure lunged at her, its fingers like talons. She ran back into the gym, desperately searching for Jake. The once celebratory atmosphere had turned into a nightmare. The other students had transformed into nightmarish creatures, their limbs elongated and their eyes glowing with malevolence. Amelia finally found Jake, but he too had changed. His features contorted into a sinister grin. He reached out for her, but she managed to escape just in time. Running through the gym, Amelia felt a cold hand grab her ankle, pulling her to the floor. She turned to see the twisted face of her best friend, Sarah, who whispered, "Join us, Amelia." Amelia broke free and fled the gym, never looking back. As she stumbled out into the night, she realized that the prom had become a nightmarish trap. The town of Willowbrook had unleashed a dark and sinister force, and Amelia was one of the few who had escaped its clutches. To this day, she still hears the haunting laughter and sees the faces of her friends and loved ones as they were that night, forever trapped in a nightmarish prom.